Hello, folks. This is your host, Tammy Tuckey, and you are now listening to the Tiara Talk Show. We bring you rare interviews with the makers of Disney magic. Whether they be singers, actors, Imagineers, animators, they have all made their mark on the Disney name. Be sure to check out the show notes, other episodes, contests, our social media pages from Facebook to Twitter, and more on our official website at www.thetiaratalkshow.com. All guest opinions are theirs and theirs alone and do not represent the opinions of the Tiara Talk Show or the host. The Tiara Talk Show is not associated with the Disney Company. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. And from all of us here at the Tiara Talk Show, have a hoop-de-doo day.
A simple life, the living wish, softly tread the sand below your feet now. 2 worlds, 1 family.
I'm excited to welcome this week's Tiara Talk Show guest, costume designer Cynthia Nordstrom, to the show. Welcome to the show.
Hello, hello.
It's great to talk to somebody who's on the other side of things, where you're not directly on stage, but you are center stage, as they say, with your costumes.
Well, thank you.
What was your inspiration to actually go into designing when you initially went to college?
Well, honestly, my other life, or my former life, was a life of a performer. And I was very concerned that, gosh, I was a terrible waitress. And then I needed a backup. And I was always very artistic. And my grandmother was a professional seamstress. And so along my childhood, I had learned to create and make patterns and clothes with her just growing up, whether they were for dolls or anything. So I don't know. I went to school for pure fashion, thinking, gosh, I need a backup career to acting. And somewhere in the middle of that, the excitement and drama that I had felt in shows and on stage happened to me when I produced a collection for the Fashion Olympics that were held at the Louvre in Paris. And forget it. I closed the door on performing, and I really just concentrated on creating and watching it with others.
Basically, we were discussing off air that yours is a Cinderella story as to how you came upon this production for Disney of Tarzan Rocks, which was featured in Animal Kingdom from about, I think, 1999 to about 2006, before it was replaced by Finding Nemo the musical. And, my family and I, we loved this show. I was a big Tarzan fan of the movie, so when we knew that there was a musical, there was no way we could skip it. So an amazing project to work on. So what was your initial reaction once they selected you to work as a costume designer? Because this was a big project. They were really banking on a lot for this concert.
Well, I had actually, in 98, we take a year or two in production to plan and build. They were building the theater for Tarzan, which was amazing because it was sculptural and large and just a new shape and exciting. So just being there in that department, I was watching certain elements of this show be created. Very exciting. But I was working on other things. I was a young designer, an expansion designer, brand new to them, and I was working on a lot of dancer events and smaller shows. I had yet to actually ever do a costume for Mickey or Friends. But something happened in the middle of their production, and Eisner at the time held a meeting, and it was open to what I like to say, any designer in the land, which was any working designer for Walt Disney World on property, which included Florida, California, and Paris. And we listened to an unnamed show, which it was Tarzan Rocks, and they basically wanted to start again and come up with a whole new visual idea for the costumes. And they didn't tell us much, and they said we had 24 hours, and we submitted artwork to LA, and then we went back to the other shows and projects we were working on. And so I had 24 hours where I disappeared, and actually I ran off to my grandmother's bungalow on Lombo Key, and I just drew and fantasized, gosh, okay, there's a show, Tarzan's in it, he's a human, but they want others, and they're other than animal creatures. There's nobody else. There's no other technical human in Tarzan other than when he meets Jane. But yet we wanted a full show feel. So it was really running with a crazy idea of abstracting parts of the magical jungle of Tarzan and seeing what a human would look like as a part of that. So, I had no fear. I did it. And then within half a day, they pulled me off of all of my other projects and said, this is your focus. Get going. We need 24 designs in 2 days. And then you're on a plane to New York, where we produced the costumes with 2 amazing, legendary costume shops in New York City. Yeah, I mean, if I think about it, it was a crazy chance for me, and probably a risk and chance for them, but it was wonderful.
It was weird how I kind of came about getting in contact with you, in a good way, of course, but, I was looking through some videos about the millennial celebration. There was this big celebration for the year 2000 at Disney World, and they had this special TV program that somebody had posted recently, and I was like, I remember that. It was such a really beautiful time, and I had never ever seen anything on Tarzan Rocks, at least behind the scenes clips about people talking about being involved in it. And so suddenly it comes to Animal Kingdom, and the big feature is Tarzan Rocks, and they get to talk to you. And I'm going to link, of course, the video below in the show notes for our listeners to check out. It's about 8 minutes long, but please watch the whole thing because, of course, you're going to see Cynthia, of course, but it's great to see how they kind of started from the beginning and got to the full production. But in this interview, they ask you, how did you kind of work around the performers, because you want to make sure they're comfortable in the clothing that they're wearing. Since you were also an entertainer, you were on the other side of things, so you knew exactly what these performers would be going through, wearing these costumes day in, day out. So you're working with dancers, with the lead vocalists of the band, with the performers who are on the wires and flying in the air. So there's so much to kind of work with, and you have to be careful. Everything has to be safe, that type of thing. So what was your initial reaction to approaching it in that retrospect? Just to make sure that it looks nice, but it also can help the performers with their performances.
Well, I mean, the universal language of good fit and comfort is really based off of any experience you have clothing and costuming dancers. So I had a huge base in that, and a huge knowledge, because my training was in fashion. It was in next level fabrications, a lot of stretch, a lot of different techniques. So that was sort of a built-in language for me. I wasn't scared, and generally I slip things on. I make things and I check them out. So I always want to make sure that nobody's changing a performance or hindered by something that I've created that they're wearing. So it's important. It's an important aspect to be comfortable. Yes, it was exciting. We open up with a beautiful Chinese web performer, which is a woman on silks. She's a blooming flower. And that was exciting because then it's also, so it's flexibility and safety, but then, gosh, what colors and fabrics do you want up there so that they transform and do something while they're in motion? So it's also, the picture you're creating for the audience. Because I had to catch up and just immerse myself in a film that we created the show before it released. That's what's so exciting about this show. It was timed to open right as the film was opening. It was amazing. So that means you don't really have a film to look at and see ahead of time, right? So they set up at the time in Florida at Hollywood Studios, MGM Studios. There was an animator's headquarters. We had just worked on Hercules, that Florida animation team, and parts of Tarzan did come out of that location as well. They came and got me, and I spent an afternoon with one of the animators in their theater, and I got to see Tarzan the movie run together, and it wasn't done. So like it would be full color, and then it would go to wonderful sketched scenes, or sometimes you would just hear Tony's voice as Tarzan. But I watched it, and I watched all the thinking behind it, and this guy right next to me was just telling me all of his secrets and what they were hoping to capture in the movement, and why, and what was so important, and pointing out different visuals for me. And I've never looked at one of Disney's films the same way again. He really opened my eyes as an artist to just a whole nother level of things you can extract from a film and create from it.
And I love that some of the characters, the background dancers have their own names. I had no idea about this because
I got through it.
Yeah, you were talking about Midnight Bloom. She had this beautiful blue outfit on. So how many names in total did they have for the background dancers?
Oh my goodness. Well, as you know, Disney, gosh, we do shows how many times a day? There's huge amounts of audiences and crowds, and they're never closed. So my initial push, they needed, 16 dancer individual. That was the other thing. It wasn't, hey, create one design and we're going to make 20 of them. It was, no, there's so much individuality in this jungle. We want it all different. We want it each design different. And so there's a first 16. And then as soon as we got the show open and we're running it operationally, it was like, gosh, Cynthia, it would be a lot easier if we could have a B cast. And they really shouldn't be the same, because it doesn't work with the storyline when you see a couple of the same thing, other than a male and female pairing. That was it. So I kept going back into the film, into my notes, and I had been given beautiful stills of certain background art from the animators, which was immensely helpful. And I would pull blossoms. There was a butterfly that was, and some of these you see right in the opening of the film, beautiful moments. The butterflies that flutter, the parrots that fall asleep. So any little creature, there's a lemur. I did parts of the weather, and then the trees. There were trees that were moss. So there was a green moss, and then there was an evening moss. And then they had a shot of water, and there is a lily, a water lily. So I was like, right there, that's someone living in the jungle with Tarzan. So it was really wonderful to find all these little gems and then be able to make them a character, a dancing character. The other part of it was, the music. It was a rock show, right? Tarzan Rocks. So the tempo of the show was unlike a sort of a shows they had before. It was very upbeat. It was modern. So, from the design of the theater, and the lighting designer, I believe, was right out of LA. Our choreographer was and still is a huge component of the music scene. The clothes needed to be part animal, but not fuzzy animal, not a stuffed animal. They needed to be abstracted, and they were tight and body sculpting, and so that it also fit the music. It fit this exciting drive that came in and out of the show. So it was, that's what captured me. So maybe that's how I got there. I don't know, but it was a great fit for me.
And what was the first show like? Were you there present for the audience's first reveal of what you guys had been working on for months on end?
Absolutely. And I got to go to the premiere. It was amazing. I mean, it's a big theater. It seats, gosh, does it seat 5,000? It seats a lot. 2,500. It's one of their larger structures, and to hear it pulsing, and to hear everybody just discover the cast coming out of the set, dropping from the sky, Tarzan swooping overhead, and have music performed. The band, the girls just singing out their hearts. There was no track. It was live. it was a concert. It was exciting, and I teared up. I definitely teared up.
And there were other things that you got to do after Tarzan Rocks and still be with the company. I think you did something with Disney on Ice, correct?
Yes, actually. Well, Tarzan was my swan song, I guess. And then I've always been from the tri-state area. And I knew, or I'd hoped I'd made a mark enough with Disney that I could go and just have other experiences and yet still work for them when they needed. And gosh, I started up on some Broadway show, and then I did a circus, because it started a whole career of working with extreme sports for me, and web and aerialists. Goodness, it just opened a whole new door for me. And then a couple years later, it was actually, goodness, maybe 5 years after I had moved from Florida, I got a call from Feld Entertainment, and they run all of Disney's tours, and we clicked. And yes, I've done several ice shows for them and some of their live shows, and it's been wonderful. It's wonderful. That's what the excitement of this was, just astounding. Like, I have all my opening posters. It was so beautiful. They would do Tarzan Coming, and then they would stamp them all with the Tarzan Rocks logo. And, it said opening, Animal Kingdom. And it was wonderful. It was literally, because I'd been there and I had seen other productions and shows, and I helped launch some things on Disney Cruise Line. I was there when we opened Animal Kingdom Park. I did a lot at Downtown Disney, former Pleasure Island. I did a lot of other events and Halloween. And so, I'd seen how the company approached certain projects, but this one was really, it was just astounding. It was just really amazing to have it all be done in secret, and then know that, gosh, the film's launching, which the film was received beautifully. And the soundtrack and the songs, they all became hits. So it was just an exciting time. It was a perfect fit for this new park, Animal Kingdom. We tapped former Olympic gymnasts to be a part of that show, because not only did they have to look the part, that show was, 24/7 strength building show. They were climbing, swinging. It was a show that required a strong performance that was something you couldn't learn. You needed to be trained and disciplined and have that kind of physical strength. So, it was just, every element was done right and well, and it was real. There's just no faking that. So it was pulling extreme inline skaters to be our monkeys. I mean, to duplicate that motion you see in the film. I mean, it's just spot on, the right way to do it, and very exciting. And the dancers were, gosh, top notch equity dancers, the best dancers from all over the parks. Just a wonderful group, and they worked hard, and they looked inspired, and I think they were inspired. Jamie was a wonderful a breath of fresh air. So it was a remarkable experience. I'm very fortunate.
And since you were a previous performer, if you ever had the chance to actually be in Tarzan Rocks, what particular character or role would you like to play?
Oh, yikes! Well, my favorite one was Butterfly. My favorite dancer costume was Butterfly, and she came out well and was definitely featured. So the dancers got a lot of nice stage time. So for me, it was also stage time. I love being Jane, but Jane's a smaller part of the story, so to speak. So I think I'd want to be a jungle creation, so that I could just be out in the environment, mixing it up with everybody and all the elements.
And I have to ask, what is one of your favorite Tarzan songs from the entire soundtrack?
Oh my gosh. Well, You'll Be in My Heart. It's amazing. And, I sat there and we all got, I got a copy of the movie very fast from them. And I had opening night, we got the soundtracks and everything, and they were signed, and just hearing that music surround you, And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. So that's my favorite.
Is there any current project we can discuss now? Because I know our listeners are going to wonder, what can we see next from Cynthia?
Well, it's funny. I was like, I need to go back to Mickey Mouse a little bit. It's been a while. I just got back from Japan. I do a lot for Miss Hello Kitty, believe it or not, and some large shows out there in Universal. So I just did a big water installation and Minions, and I currently have a tour for Cartoon Network that's rehearsing and launching. But right now I'm local. I'm doing an off-Broadway play set to open this fall and getting my projects in line for spring. So nothing I can talk about yet. But yeah, when I'm not at Disney, it's funny. Now that I'm out on my own, I do a lot of work for Universal and have done some great big productions on their side. And you just go where the next challenge is, or I tend to just jump, So that's how it started with me many years ago with Tarzan, which I really had no intention of even knowing that I'd work on it, and it was an opportunity that happened, and you just, I don't know, you just jump, and I never got caught up, and I never looked back, and it worked. So I kind of try to keep a hold of that looking forward. So we'll see.
Well, before we end our conversation, I have 3 Disney-themed questions I ask each guest. I call them the Fab 3. So we'll start with the Donald one, which is, as a child, what Disney film was one of your favorites to see in the movie theater?
Okay, that's easy. It was my first film as a very young child in a movie theater, and it was Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty.
And our goofy question, what Disney character do you think would be your best friend if you met them in person?
Ooh, good question. For some reason I am drawn to Maleficent. I feel like she has layers, but that's an evil Empire woman. I think, girl-wise, I think Rapunzel. I think she and I would, even though she doesn't wear shoes, I'd have to fix that. I think we'd get along just fine. She's a great sense about her.
And finally, our Mickey question. If I asked you to name any Disney song at this very moment, what immediately comes to mind?
When You Wish Upon a Star. I feel like as a child, I was lucky enough to be brought a few times with my young family, and I made a wish to that song as we closed the park. And of course, on your last day, you always have to end your day at the Magic Kingdom, and or we always did. And the tears are in your eyes as a young child. And I walked out and I made a wish in my heart, and that I would come back one day and be a part of Disney. And so I love that it came true, and I feel like part of it was because that song played, it happened, and it was just a piece of magic. But that's the song.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Cynthia. I really do appreciate it because, it does take a lot of time and hard work behind the scenes to have a show like Tarzan Rocks appear at Walt Disney World. And it's so fascinating to know that story. So thank you so much for your time and for all the hard work you gave to Tarzan Rocks, because my family and I, we definitely appreciated it. And I know that the cast members who got to wear those costumes felt like queens and kings, and everybody else who got to see that show, millions of people.
Well, thank you for having me, Tammy. And it was, your questions were wonderful, but it's always great to share some of the hidden magic that we get to be a part of now and then.
I'm gonna call him Tarzan.